Draw me close to you, never let me go. And lay it all down again, to hear you say that I'm a friend.
So, folks, today we're going to talk about the essence of my message regarding sex. And I'm going to say that sexual lovemaking results in massively powerful spiritual forces, which are little understood and therefore largely ignored by all sides of the spectrum of believers and unbelievers. Sexual lovemaking was very carefully and thoughtfully crafted by the Almighty Creator, whose true name is Yah the Eternally Self-Existing, and should therefore be treated with respect as a very precious gift. So just a bit of context before I get started in the teaching. I want to stress that the Almighty Creator desires a deep personal relationship with you. If you're not actively serving Yah, then by default you're serving Satan. My objective is to show you how you can make a big difference on earth and qualify for a position of high esteem in heaven for eternity. It's important to understand that as a believer, just being good is not the point. It's relationship with Yah that counts. Without this, you will be in a very unpleasant place in heaven with no way out. And my aim is to show you how to get close to Father. If you're a good person without a clear relationship with Yah, then you're in a spiritual no man's land and you will not enter heaven when you die. The Creator has said regarding unbelievers, why would I want someone to spend eternity with me when they do not believe I exist? God's calling everybody on the planet to be involved and serve Him and help Him to have victory over Satan. My goal is to show you how you can help to do this. Fundamentally, we each need to learn to see things on earth from Yah's perspective, and my aim is to teach you how. So every teaching that I give is around understanding Yah better, understanding Yah's ways, and living a life that's pleasing to Him. And so we're going to talk about sex, the essence of my message regarding sex. And just by the way, the greatest assurance you have regarding the accuracy of what I teach is that I regularly pray, and I have prayed since 1998 on and off and regularly for the last, I don't know how many years. Yah, judge me severely and correct me harshly and show me the level of my present deception and how to correct it with regard to everything that I write and publish. So everything that I'm teaching, I have taught for many years, I have known for many years, I've prayed for judgment, and so I'm pretty confident that what I'm teaching is accurate. So, as I said a minute ago, sexual lovemaking results in massively powerful spiritual forces which are little understood and therefore largely ignored by all sides of the spectrum of believers and unbelievers. Sexual lovemaking was very carefully and thoughtfully crafted by the Almighty Creator, whose true name is Yah the Eternally Self-Existing, and it should therefore be treated with respect as a very precious gift. Fundamentally, what follows is addressed to believers, although most of the principles apply equally to unbelievers. If you find yourself getting offended, I ask you just to reconsider. This really is important. And it's vital to understand that there's a whole lot of corruption amongst what a lot of believers believe about sex. People think that sex is dirty, etc., etc., etc. Sex within marriage, within a covenant union between a man and a woman or man and woman, is beautiful, or it's intended to be beautiful and fulfilling and very pleasurable. Outside of marriage, it's forbidden. Fundamentally, sexual lovemaking is the highest spiritual act that human beings can perform after worship of the Creator. But most believers do not know how to do this well. This article is intended to address this shortcoming. Following are the major components of sex and sexuality, which in my experience are fundamental to understanding the sexual nature of human beings. So I want to start out by saying that sex is a fundamental element of being human. Without sex, there is no reproduction and human beings would die out. Sexual reproduction is a very carefully designed mechanism for ensuring diversity and sustainability. Accordingly, one must recognize that sexuality and sexual reproduction and the associated sexual desire, sexual lovemaking, etc., are intrinsic and fundamental elements of being human. This article seeks to make visible the full extent to which sexuality is central to human existence and why I say that. Sex is intended to be highly pleasurable, and we have a huge number of nerve endings and mental and emotional drivers that exist only to help us enjoy sexual lovemaking and desire it. Sexual lovemaking is intended to create a powerful, unbreakable bond between a man and a woman. Every time a man or woman experiences orgasm, they eject part of their spirit that bonds with their partner. The satanic and demonic realm have orchestrated matters such that unbelievers may experience the full power of sex, whereas believers are frequently prudes and very inhibited sexually. Thus, learning about sex is very difficult for believers. There's a tendency in many religious groupings for believers to be very inhibited with regard to sex and not to really teach how to enjoy sex. Celibacy is not from Father. We were designed to live in a loving family units with intense, uninhibited sexual congress. All religious teaching relating to celibacy is false and not from Father. Yahushua, Jesus, was celibate for very specific reasons that do not apply to any other believer and have never applied and will never apply to any other believer. The fact is that if Yeshua had joined himself to a woman, he would have had a transfer of demons from her. He would have not been able to live without sin, and he would not have been able to fulfill his calling. Loneliness leads to unwise socialization, which leads to unwise sexual unions. We were not designed to live alone. We were designed to live in caring, loving relationship with lots of cuddling, kissing, love-making, communing, etc. Marriages where this is missing will eventually almost end up on the rocks and almost certainly end up with partners going outside of their marriage. A family unit where man and women are tightly one flesh and in harmony will be very prosperous, and a family unit where the members are not in harmony will be in lack and will ultimately fail. Note that a person on their own is relatively weak spiritually. Particularly a man needs at least one woman in strong covenant in order to prosper. A single woman can request Yah to be her husband and to cover her and protect her, and can therefore be very strong. For reasons discussed later, the predominant situation for believing women is to live without an earthly husband. Sexual intercourse is an extremely powerful spiritual act. Sexual intercourse involves spirit-to-spirit contact between the parties engaged in the sexual act, with associated very powerful forces at play. Sexual lovemaking, in which both parties give themselves freely and considerately, causes a spiritual force we call love to come into existence. More correctly, this is chesed in Hebrew, meaning covenant love, as described in the Bible in 1 Corinthians 13, 4-10. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Love never fails, love never dies. But where there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when that which is perfect has come, then that which is in part will be done away. This is really important. Love never dies. Do not make love to someone you do not intend to spend the rest of your life with. You will be torn apart if they leave you or you try and leave them. This phenomenon leads to a lot of spiritual confusion in those that fornicate. The power of sex is something that is well understood by Satanists and witches and is used very effectively by them. The spiritual forces at play here are real, whether you believe it or not. Hiding this from believers is one of Satan's most successful frauds. The red Valentine's heart is a symbolic representation of the aroused woman's vulva, and therefore has strong sexual connotations, which should be kept in mind in using that symbol. Only use it when with someone you are in sexual life covenant. Point number 3, the Virgin's Covenant. When a man penetrates a virgin and ruptures her hymen with shedding of blood, this is a covenant act whereby in the court of heaven, a covenant union, what we typically call marriage, comes into existence. I write here with regard to believers. For unbelievers, the court of heaven is not interested in them. This Virgin's Covenant is unbreakable by human beings, and it locks the man and woman into a lifetime legal agreement before the court of heaven, which locks down whatever they have agreed or not agreed at the moment the hymen is ruptured. Thus, whatever was in place before the basis of their relationship, whether they like it or not. So if the man is for submission to the woman, then that is the state for the rest of the union. If the man has multiple sexual partners, then the woman has by default consented to this. And so for all other facets of the relationship. See the article Virgin's Covenant Lost on the website for detailed discussion. Where a woman is no longer with the man who took her virginity and there's no way that he will take her back. If she's a believer, she must do all she can to contact him and ask him to take her back. And it is only if he refuses, which is commonplace, then she can ask Father Yah for a divorce. So I regularly come across women who didn't understand these principles. They gave their virginity to a man just in casual sex because they thought, well, I'm now sexually aware and I'd like sex, and this guy looks okay, so I'll let him, forgive my language, screw me. And so she loses her virginity, and it doesn't seem important. She doesn't say, well, why do I have this seal? And so it's really, really important that for you who are listening to this, who have children who are girls, before they reach the age of puberty, you need to make them aware of the sacredness of their virginity and support them to protect their virginity until they meet the right man. Then the one flesh covenant. Male semen contains all the elements of blood, and therefore male ejaculation into the vagina of a woman seals a similar covenant relationship to that described for the Virgin's Covenant, albeit somewhat less contractually strong. When this takes place in conjunction with the taking and giving of virginity, it is particularly strong, and that's the way sex is intended to be. At the same time as physical ejaculation of sperm, there is a spiritual ejaculation of the spirit of the man into the woman, such that an unbreakable spiritual bond is formed between the man and woman. This is the one flesh bond. The more times the man ejaculates in the woman, the stronger the bond becomes, until they are so strongly connected that they know each other's thoughts, and there's a massively powerful connection between them. If the man ejaculates in the mouth, vulva, or anus of the woman, a weaker bond is formed, where the woman is spiritually a virgin. This is a betrothal bond. If she is already joined to another man, then this is adulterous. Ejaculation elsewhere on the body of the woman forms a weaker one-flesh bond and does not lead to betrothal. When a woman climaxes in contact with a man, a portion of her spirit is likewise ejaculated. If he is in her vagina at the time, then a full-strength bond is formed. Simultaneous orgasm is particularly powerful. If she reaches her climax through manual or oral stimulation or contact with another part of the man, then a weaker bond is formed. If two women engage in sexual intercourse with orgasm, then a one-flesh bond is also formed at the betrothal level. If two men engage in sexual intercourse anally or orally, then a one-flesh bond is formed at the betrothal level, albeit that this is adultery. Adultery is a sexual union between two men, whether via a commonly joined woman or two men together. This is forbidden for believers. This law is irrelevant to unbelievers. Note that in conjunction with the one flesh bond, there is a transfer of demons, replication of demons between sexual partners. There are soul ties, there are friendship ties, etc., all of which have spiritual significance and which will hold a legitimate couple of man and woman, or man and several women together, which have to be cut off in the event of divorce, in the case of cleaning up after fornication, in the event of repenting of fornication. So soul tie is an emotional tie. And that is formed as soon as people start getting close to other. So if a man and woman start dating and start becoming friends, they form a soul tie, a friendship tie. And that's a spiritual to spirit joining. It's not nearly as strong as the one flesh bond, but it's significant. If they make promises to each other, if they make vows, even before they've had sex, those vows create binding ties. And if they then consummate a sexual union, those vows are locked down in the court of heaven. So as I said just now, if a woman has had sex with another man and she then consummates with a new man, he is, by the act of sexual intercourse, consenting to her having multiple sexual partners, and he should not be surprised if they then get legally married that she commits adultery, because he agreed to it by the fact that he had sex with her when she was already one with another man. Likewise with a woman, if she has sex with a man who's already had sex with other women, she is by default consenting to him having multiple wives. Once a one flesh covenant bond is formed at the betrothal level or stronger, the woman comes under the covering of the man. This is a spiritual umbrella which shelters the woman from spiritual attack, provided she's in alignment with the man. This frees the woman up to be a powerful support to the man. Note that vows in church or court are only valid if the woman is a virgin at the time those vows are taken. Otherwise, the conditions that prevailed at the time of consummation are upheld in the court of heaven, and the vows in church or court are meaningless. So only take vows in church or in court if the woman is a virgin. If you've already consummated the relationship, then whatever was in force at the time of consummation is upheld in the court of heaven, and what you say in court or in the human court or church is irrelevant. It's meaningless. Under those circumstances, you should go to church or court, and the only reason you do that is in order to get a legal standing for your relationship. Ask for the blessing of your covenant and the blessing of your relationship. Do not treat it as marriage, because the marriage already took place when you consummated. Women are spiritually and intellectually equal to men. I've been deeply grieved by recent reports of women in certain countries being forced into marriage against their will, having their education and commercial activity constrained, and generally being treated as second-class citizens. It's vital to understand that for believers in the sight of the Creator, men and women are entirely equal, and they simply have different principal roles. In particular, they're intellectually equal. In this context, it's vital to understand that there are roughly 7 times more women than men in the body of true believers on earth today, and in high ranks in heaven. See the article, Single Women Believers, 7 Times Men website, and also Demographics of the Kingdom of Yah elaboration on the website. It is entirely possible for a woman to be president, prime minister, chief executive, etc. Women are not second-class citizens, and it grieves Father deeply that some male believers treat women in this way. That said, many women choose to align themselves with their man and in support of their men, and that is entirely acceptable and a matter of personal choice. First prize is for man and woman or women to be harmoniously engaged in commercial and ministry activity together. It's entirely possible for women to have powerful sexual relationships with other women within a committed covenant relationship. So legal marriage between women is entirely permissible for believers. Marriage between male believers is forbidden. Then treat women tenderly and make love considerately. That said, it is appropriate for men to treat women who are joined to them tenderly and make love to them considerately. It's incumbent on the woman to do the same, but the issue is generally a case of men treating women badly, often because they've never been taught how to treat a woman well. A corollary to this is that where a woman is treated badly or where a woman is contentious or fault-finding, this causes spiritual distress to the man, which is likened in the Bible to rottenness in the bones. So if a woman is treating a man badly, the first place to look is to see whether he is treating her badly. Proverbs 12:4, a worthy woman is the crown of her husband, but a disgraceful wife is as rottenness in his bones. As a general principle, women will respond very favorably to a man who treats them with respect and tenderly, in other words, a gentle man. Men and women in covenant union were created to treat one another with respect, intense desire, passion, and tenderness. There is a huge amount of wrong thinking on this topic. Then 7 days of consummation. Following consummation, there is a 7-day window during which the spiritual realm is particularly supportive of the relationship between man and woman or between two women. During this period, the parties should make love as frequently and as intensely as possible. This will result in the strongest possible one-flesh bond and love bond, and will put them in a position for a strong, robust, and highly sustainable lifetime union. Such a case, failure of the relationship at a later date is highly unlikely. So coming back to this point about women 7 times more than men, as noted above, in the body of true believers, there are roughly 7 times more women than men, depending on the assembly. In this context, given that most women cannot share their man, the reality is that believing women should not look for a husband unless Father clearly brings them one. Note also that a woman should only join herself to a man who is closer to Father than she is, which, since there are many more women close to Father than men, means that most women should remain single. That said, it is important to note that Leviticus 18:22 states, "Do not have sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman. That is detestable. For the believers, sex between men is forbidden. There is nothing that says that sex between women in a committed relationship is forbidden. So it is entirely permissible for 2 or more women who committed believers to establish a family unit in which they have a strong sexual relationship with no man." In adultery, as noted before, adultery is a sexual union between 2 men, either 2 men joined directly together or 2 men through union with the same woman. This results in a spiritual short circuit between the 2 male bloodlines, and in the case of believers, is an abomination in the sight of the Creator. Where such adulterous bonds exist, appropriate measures must be taken to repent and clean up and cut the ties that have been formed. See the article Separation of Man and Woman on the website. In the case of unbelievers, the Creator is entirely indifferent. They can do what they like. Where a woman commits adultery against her man, a spirit of jealousy comes on the man, and he may get bad-tempered and even violent. A woman who is one with more than one man will attract abuse because she is violating her covenant with one or more of those men. Women who have had previous sexual partners and enter into a committed relationship without cleaning up previous unions, as set out below, may well be treated badly and even violently. The answer is to clean up the one-flesh bonds, etc. I've encountered a number of situations where a woman had had previous sexual partners. She's now married in the sight of man. She's in adultery in the sight of Yah. And the man is treating her badly. And he's treating her badly because she's a fornicator. He may not know that she's a fornicator, but there's something spiritually that happens. Fornication is random sex with varying partners and defeats all the above and leads to spiritual confusion and defeats Yah's intents. It is a gross abomination for believers. Note that where one has a constructive and considerate relationship with another person of the opposite gender, and where one or both persons are in a toxic or unloving union, the potential to fall in love is considerable. Exercise caution unless you are spiritually in a position where such attraction may legally in the court of heaven lead to a lifetime sexual covenant. In that case, negotiate terms and move to consummation quickly after first divorcing if appropriate. Folks, this is really important. It is so that men and women are attracted to one another. And if a man or a woman is in a really bad relationship and he or she forms a close friendship with a member of the other sex, it's very likely that they're going to end up falling in love and a whole lot of things are going to happen. So you need to be cautious about how you get involved with people. Families with more than one woman. I've said this briefly before. Father Yah created human beings with the capacity for one man to covenant with more than one woman, token of virginity. Sadly, very few women can handle this today. See, in cases where such families exist, extremely powerful simultaneous orgasms between all partners are possible and desirable. Note that, strictly speaking, in terms of overall laws of father, a man taking another woman is not a basis for divorce, although if there is a strong covenant agreement not to take further women, then there may be a basis for divorce. So if before you consummate, the woman says to the man, I am only going to consummate with you if I am going to be the only only woman in your life. And the man says, yes, I agree to that. Then if he goes and goes with a second woman, he is breaking covenant, and that may well be a basis for divorce. But if that conversation does not take place, then by default, the Virgin's Covenant allows a man to have as many wives as he wants. So you need to be careful about what you talk about. And the point I made earlier, if the man has already had sex with other women and a woman gives her virginity to him, she is by default consenting to him having other wives. Spiritual categories with regard to sex. There are broadly a number of spiritual categories with regard to sex in the context of believers. First one, men and women who gave and received the Virgin's Covenant, have never had extraneous sexual congress, and who have had powerful loving sex throughout their union. These families will be very strong and tend to be very prosperous. You don't come across this very frequently. Secondly, men and women who entered into covenant after other sexual partners, but who consummated strongly and have had a very strong sexual relationship, also infrequent amongst believers, but in extreme cases, this can be a strong situation. Thirdly, men and women who engage in fornication with multiple partners, they are constantly looking for what they're missing and never really form strong relationships. They will easily enter into new sexual relationships and generally respond favorable to any sexual approach. This is often the case where first sexual encounters were casual with different partners at an early stage. This should never happen to believers. And if you've become a believer and you've got this history, you need to clean up and get rid of it. And then finally, men and women who eschew sex and think it is dirty and have locked down their sexual desire. These women will react very harshly and negatively to any form of sexual approach. There are quite a significant number of men and women believers who have this really bad attitude to sex because they don't understand the difference between sex outside of marriage and inside. These categories will respond very differently to others who seek to initiate a sexual connection with them. In principle, all believers should be in categories A and B, although many are in category D and will battle to form a deep covenant relationship. Any form of sexual approach, even at the most basic level, to a category D woman will be harshly rebuffed and may lead to complaints and even legal action. Note that with regard to so-called transgender people, the gender that is recognized in heaven is the birth gender for each human being. Transgender is not recognized by the court of heaven, and for unbelievers this is irrelevant. They can do what they like. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff about that, I'm sure you're aware of. In the age of consummation, Father's original intent was for women to enter into a lifetime covenant at puberty, or certainly at the age at which they first become sexually aware. In most countries, this is now illegal and is undesirable because our society has not prepared women to lose their virginity at that age. Google reports that most men and women today lose their virginity at about the age of 17 to 18. The thing to note here is that our society, for the most part, condones loose sex at this age when young adults' hormones get out of control. The desirable state is firstly that teenagers are educated about the issues discussed here and encouraged and supported to wait until they find a suitable life partner. What I understand to be the ideal situation was described to me by an Orthodox Jewish friend many years ago when he informed me that in his social setting, when a young man or woman reached the age of strong sexual urges, their parents would evaluate their social circle and look for a young man or woman who they considered as a suitable lifetime mate for their child. Once they had identified someone, they would approach that person's parents, have a discussion, and if both sets of parents considered their teenagers suitably matched, they would arrange for the youngsters to meet and discuss their interests at center. The young man and young woman both agreed that they could see themselves living with the other, then a wedding would be arranged within a few weeks and the young couple would consummate and live with one or other set of parents. In this context, it is vital to understand that with a strong consummation, it is possible for just about any man and any woman to very successfully enter a lifetime covenant relationship, in other words, marriage. That was Yah's intention from the beginning. The challenge is to find a person who is extremely well suited and with whom there's a strong connection. Dropping in and out of failed sexual relationships is not Father's way. So essentially what I'm saying is if you pick a partner who is socially compatible from an education point of view, etc., and you then strongly consummate, the marriage will work. So this would typically take place around the age of 18, in other words, as soon as it was legal. It is notable that enduring relationships occur when the woman is around this age. I recently connected with a school friend who married immediately after leaving school and who still had a very strong marriage 50 years later. In general, it was originally desirable for the man to be somewhat older than the woman, but in current circumstances, this is generally not possible, certainly for a first wife. And then divorce. It is regrettably so that in this age, marriages do fail and divorce is sometimes necessary. Note that where a believer is joined to an unbeliever, divorce is mandatory and is required by the Almighty Creator. This is not negotiable. It does not matter how good the marriage may be. The only exception is if the unbelieving spouse can be brought to belief fairly quickly. If consummation took place when there were multiple one-flesh bonds and covenant bonds with people who were not part of the union, then separation from the men or women who were illegal is required. If there was a weak consummation, such as a so-called quickie, and then infrequent hasty sex, it is highly likely that the union will be weak, and the probability of the union failing is very high. If there was a strong virgin consummation with strong one-flesh bond and strong 7-day lovemaking, after consummation, the union is likely to be very strong and will stand no matter what comes. This is how things are intended to be. If the choice of partner is inappropriate intellectually, socially, etc., this may give rise to problems, so choosing the right partner before first intercourse is really important. I strongly advise that parents are involved to facilitate the right choice, as discussed before, for youngsters who are becoming strongly sexually aware. If you've done everything possible to make your relationship work in terms of this article and your current husband or wife refuses to work with you and do all necessary to make the relationship work powerfully, there will come a time when Father will condone divorce. I've come to understand that while Yah hates divorce, he will condone it after all reasonable attempts have been made to save the marriage. Note that you break off a relationship after significant positive lovemaking, it will be very painful. But provided you've made absolutely certain this is the right thing to do in the court of heaven, and then sweat it out and look for somebody else. If divorce or separation is necessary, see the article, Separation of Man and Body. What is forbidden? There is a lot of wrong thinking among believers with regard to sex in terms of forbidden acts. The reality is that only certain relationships are forbidden, nothing else. So what is forbidden? Well, obviously sex with animals is forbidden. Sex between men is forbidden. Sex by two or more men with the same woman at the same time or at different times is forbidden. Sex by a woman with multiple men at the same time or different times, corollary of the previous point, is forbidden. There are other relationships that were forbidden at the time of Moshe Moses, but that was as a consequence of degradation of human beings, not in terms of a commandment. Breeding between close relatives today frequently results to DNA abnormalities and deformities and is therefore forbidden. Generally, this is illegal in most countries, so that's brothers and sisters and with first cousins. Note that originally the children of Adam and Chava, Eve, had no choice but to marry brothers and sisters, and children of Noah's sons had no choice but to marry brothers and sisters or first cousins. So while these relationships are now prohibited, they are not prohibited in the way that the forbidden items listed above A to D are prohibited. What is not forbidden? Any sexual act between consenting partners in a lifetime covenant relationship is not forbidden. Masturbation either way, oral sex, fellatio, woman on man, cunnilingus, man or woman on man or woman on woman, oral sex is permissible. This is actually desirable as part of the sexual repertoire and give rise to strong love bonds if done tenderly. Given that men generally can only climax once or maybe twice under extreme circumstances, the man should generally attempt to give his wife at least one orgasm before penetration. Then anal penetration of the woman or stimulation of either anally is permissible. It's up to each partner as an aesthetic issue, and it's subject to willing consent. Some people like it, some people hate it. Bondage and similar is not forbidden, and I strongly advise that it is not appropriate in a relationship seeking to serve Father. Other considerations, masturbation, pornography, etc. Masturbation is undesirable if it focuses on forbidden situations, but it is infinitely better than loose, uncommitted sex or sex with an unsuitable partner. Masturbation focusing on a specific person or a specific photograph or a specific person will result in a weak one-flesh bond, but this can be relatively easily cut off. However, strong simultaneous orgasm with remote sex can result in a marriage covenant if the woman is free to marry. So phone sex, Zoom sex, etc. is not advisable unless the intent is to marry or the partners are already married. Pornography is also undesirable, but it is far preferable to make use of pornography provided it is not focused on forbidden situations than it is to engage in loose, uncommitted sex or sex with an unsuitable partner. Dating is dangerous. Dating where when one is sexually deprived will very rapidly result in sex whether the other partner is a suitable life partner or not. If you're going to date, do so on a dating site where you can specify that your objective is a lifetime covenant relationship, set out your beliefs and stress that you're looking for a believer of similar spiritual maturity to yourself, and that you will have detailed discussion of your interests, beliefs, and objectives in life in order to ensure you are compatible from the very first meeting. Do not continue meeting if your first meeting fails to establish a substantial common ground, and certainly do not mess around sexually unless you're certain that this is for life. Sexual technique is a paramount skill. I've increasingly come to realize that most people have very little instruction in the techniques of lovemaking, and particularly on how you engage in considerate, tender lovemaking, coupled with multiple strong orgasms. Over the years, I've studied those techniques through various books, albeit I've not been very successful applying them in practice. I've concluded that education with regard to sexual technique is highly desirable before consummation. There's a book called The Joy of Sex by Alex Comfort, which is, while it's basically unbelievers and it includes reference to undesirable sexual situations, is quite good on technique. Note that Satan has corrupted the view of believers with regard to sex in order to deprive and weaken believers. It has left sex amongst unbelievers to reach its full potential in order to put another obstacle in the way of unbelievers coming to believe. So you'll find that some unbelievers have really good sex. Most believers don't. So in conclusion, sex is intended to be beautiful and powerful. I hope that through this broadcast I've sensitized you to what is possible and intended. So I want to just wrap up by talking about the ranks in heaven that are available to believers today. And I talk about this every week. From the diagram, you see the mountain of Yah, getting close to Yah. The metaphor of the mountain is to get close to Yah takes effort, it takes commitment. It's relatively easy to fall off the mountain, so you really need to work at it. On the right, what you see there is wise stewards, good and faithful servants, overcomers, and friends. Those are the ranks that you should be aiming for in heaven as a believer. And the numbers there are what applied on the 25th of December 2015. It's about half that today. There are very few people on earth who are on the mountain of Yah. And it's an opportunity for you to get really close to Yah and get close to the top of the mountain and become a friend. And I encourage you to go for that. So what we're really talking about is that the ideal goal is for you to seek to sit on a throne with Yah for eternity. And that means you become an overcomer, which means you overcome sin, you overcome the cares of the world, and you really, really get close to Father. And a friend, you get to a place where you're in constant dialogue with him, you understand his way of thinking, and you're working closely with him towards his objectives on it. A prayer, if you've decided to seek a deep and powerful relationship with the Creator. Father Yah, I desire to become your friend. Please take me by the hand and lead me. Please show me what to read and listen to. Please show me who to speak to. Bring the people you want in my life into my life, and take those that you do not want out. Please open the doors in my life that you want opened. Please close the doors in my life that you want closed. Please help me to choose who I should use as a pattern for my life. Please help me to come to a place of deep relationship with you. Please help me to come to a place of power anointing. Amen. So I want to close by asking you, what is the state of your relationship with the Almighty Creator? I'd like to ask you to critically examine where you are relative to him today. Do you talk to him constantly throughout the day and allow him to lead you in every possible way? Do you worship him at every opportunity? Do you have you clearly and unambiguously heard him call you friend? If not, you're failing in your life purpose, and you'll be bitterly disappointed when you reach the end of your life on earth. If you now come to belief, please contact me. There's an article on the webpage, Actions on First Belief. I'm going to open the floor to questions. Folks, that's all. Next week, I'm going to start. I've referred quite a few times to this article, 7 Components in Drawing Close to the Creator. It's about 70 pages. And so what I'm planning is for the next 7 weeks, I'm going to take that article one section at a time and teach on each of those. So next week, we're going to start with the introduction and decision. And this teaching addresses the measures you can take to draw close to the Almighty Creator starting now. These steps apply whether you have previously believed or whether you have now chosen to believe for the first time. The emphasis will vary depending on where you're coming from. So folks, thank you so much for listening. I hope you found this teaching of value. Okay, folks, thank you so much. That's all for today. And bye, everyone. Bye.